So hello and welcome to this special edition of our Road to Rejoin meetings. And tonight we are joined by the illustrious Maximilien Robespierre, famous from the French Revolution, as you might know, and also Phil Moorhouse, famous for the Yorkshire Revolution. They are two phenomenally successful YouTubers who have both been pumping out videos since 2018, I think. And they have amassed a huge number of avid fans, and they both put out at least 2 videos a day talking about the absolute madness of Brexit and other things as well, just politics in general. So first of all, I'd like to go to Phil. Phil, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, I am sort of a teacher. I was a teacher for quite a lot of years, and then politics went extremely crazy, and now I've shouted at the internet, although I'm still doing a little bit of part-time teaching for a few more weeks. And yeah, I mean, my thing really is mostly British politics, but of course, the craziest aspect of British politics at the moment is Brexit. But then, quite frankly, if Brexit wasn't a thing, it's still fairly crazy.
Okay, and then over to Max. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm an immigrant, an Irish immigrant living in Italy, but I've always been passionate about British politics. I started out listening to James O'Brien, and I was hooked when I actually found him as one of the only ones talking about Brexit from the Remain side a number of years ago, and I decided to respond as well, because I have a passion for Brexit, I can say, in a sense, a passion to stop it if possible. But I started uploading videos about Brexit, responding to Brexiteers, and more or less gone from there.
So if you've seen any of Phil's or Max's work, so Phil generally talks for about 10 minutes or 20 minutes about a particular topic, whereas Max's videos tend to be a response to something incredibly stupid that a politician has said. And that's why I say he uploads 2 or 3 videos a day, because there's a lot to get through. There's a lot to get through. So if you would like to start asking questions, if you head into the, where is it? The chat. Is it the chat where you ask questions, or is it reactions? There is a way of asking questions, which I can't see at the moment. What's going on? Why can't I see this? Oh, well, maybe if you put them in the chat. If you'd like to ask a question, you should be able to vote it up or vote it down as you wish. But I've got a few questions to start off, which have been emailed in. So the first one is a question for Phil. So Phil, you're up. This is from Niall. He says, hi, do you think the Tories want things to get as bad as possible so they can join the customs union, etc., and still claim they got Brexit done, but still have a semi-return because the general public and business have made them due to the bad things being so bad?
I don't think there's that much long-term thinking. I think, you know, with like, if you compare the Conservatives with Labour, Labour's splits are very obvious because they all aired publicly, whereas the Conservatives still have that split. Boris Johnson isn't a Brexiteer. He's delivered Brexit because he wanted to be Prime Minister. He's not a Brexiteer. He argued against the concept for many years, but there are actual Brexiteers in the party. So I think it is just a case of the non-Brexiteers, which might be included in Boris Johnson at this point, just doing whatever is necessary to keep them quiet for just a few hours more. And it's just, I think they're just getting to the end of the day. I think that there are some people who have some designs, but I don't think there's a coordinated plan within the party, or I see no evidence for it.
Okay, fair enough. We'll go to the next question. This is also for Phil. I'll try and make the next one for Max. Should Scotland leave the UK? The UK will become a failed state. The UK government, whoever is at the time, the House of Lords would also be a failed system. Would this trigger setting up an English or regional parliament and new elections?
I suppose it depends on what order everything goes, because the UK could just all explode at once, potentially. I mean, there'd be less need for it, wouldn't there? I mean, I think there should be regional parliaments now. But you could argue the smaller the UK gets, there isn't really a huge, even though I think there's huge differences in culture between the different parts of England, there isn't really, I don't see a big compulsive drive towards, say, the north of England having its own parliament or the Midlands. So I'm not sure that there'd be the impetus for it.
Fair enough. Okay, so this is I'll field this over to Max. It's a bit topical. I don't know when this was sent, but it might be less topical now since what's happened. But does the furore over the European Super League have anything to tell us about our use of social media? Or is it just another episode where Boris Johnson claims all the credit?
I think Boris Johnson is definitely trying to benefit from this. But it is interesting how this started out as something driven by social media. The response to the news was all over social media, and there has been an orchestrated campaign on social media to do something to fight back against this Super League. I think Boris Johnson doesn't really care about the Super League. He doesn't care about the footballers or the fans, but he does know that it's something he can use to distract. And I think at the moment he's deciding, well, look, I'll support the fans because it's something I can use. You know, if there were Tories benefiting from this, you can be sure that he wouldn't be against it.
Cool. Okay, that was from Lillian and Tony McCobb. Next question. Let's have a look. As an avid follower of both Phil and Max, I noticed they use high quality background visuals in Phil's case and video clips for Max. Is it expensive for them to, oh God, maybe I shouldn't ask this one, to obtain the copyright to use these high quality pictures and video content?
Fair use. I use it on the basis of fair use.
Fair use. Yeah. Max, fair use?
Yeah, I actually use there's a website I found that provides images they're actually free images. I think the images are used, when they're used, in a sense, they're promoted by the website I use, it's called Pixels, where you can download images for free and you're free to use them in respect to fair use. So it isn't expensive.
Yeah, I use Pexels a lot. Also, I use Wikipedia, because a lot of the pictures on Wikipedia are Creative Commons, so you can use them. But yeah, fair use follows. It covers quite a lot of stuff. If you're reviewing a film, you can show a lot of a film on a YouTube video and get away with it. But music is the one thing that YouTube comes down like a ton of bricks. So yeah, don't try and use copyrighted music, because you'll be in trouble. We have two questions from this is from Martin Schwartz. First of all, if the EU doesn't ratify the trade deal to the end of August, or at the end of August, what would the consequences be for the UK, and what reactions do they expect in Northern Ireland? Can we take that to Phil first?
From what I gather, I don't think that's now likely. It looks like the EU are going to do that, although I don't see how they can, whilst we refuse to publicly support the protocol. But if it did happen, I mean, I'm quite sure there's quite a lot of the Conservative Party want that. You know, they want the Brexit deal to fail and for them to just blame the EU, because at the end of the day, that's because the EU Parliament voted it down. We didn't. And then they'll use that as an excuse. Well, you might as well drop the whole withdrawal agreement, because the whole point of the withdrawal agreement was to get the Brexit deal. And they want the no deal Brexit. They know they couldn't get it through Parliament. Not even the mad Parliament we have now would have actively voted for a no deal Brexit. So I have no doubt that they would want that. The repercussions in the UK, I think, would be severe, though, because if you look at the moment, you know, Johnson's riding high in the polls and all the rest of it. But just before Christmas, when France closed their borders because of the new Kent variant, it was Johnson that suffered in the polls. No one blamed the French. Maybe David Davis did. But most people didn't blame the French. They blamed Boris Johnson for allowing the situation to occur. And I think the same thing would happen here, but there would be a good 100 Conservative MPs who would be loving it.
Okay, that same question over to Max, and can you talk a little bit about Northern Ireland? Obviously, that's more closer to your neck of the woods originally.
Yeah, well, and I agree with Phil. It's it would benefit certain Tories, certain Brexiteers would be delighted if the European Union didn't ratify it. So they would a no deal Brexit would come into place, come into being, and as you know, many of us have said before, they don't care about the consequences, so they would be fully on board with a no deal Brexit. I don't think the European Union are going to go down that road, but it's still possible. In regards to Northern Ireland, so what happened is, of course, the withdrawal agreement would be in serious trouble, I think, because you would have in regards to the Northern Ireland Protocol, there would now be tariffs along with checks. So this would be even worse. I think the loyalist communities would respond even worse to that, because they would say, look, it's even worse than we actually thought.
Okay, and the second question there from Martin is, when I watch videos from pro-Brexit and pro-EU channels, there's a big difference in the comments. Pro-EU, more neutral and facts, sometimes Schadenfreude, which I probably pronounced wrong, sorry to any German friends out there. Pro-Brexit, more populist comments and hate of the EU. Why do you think there is so much hate against the EU? That's to Phil.
I think they're just hateful people, ultimately. You know, the EU haven't done us any harm. Whenever you try and say to someone, these EU rules that you think are so bad, could you name one that's hurt you? Could you name one that restricts you? They can't name one because it doesn't exist. If they try and talk about bendy bananas or prawn cocktail crisps, you just say, we've always had them. I don't think, you know, I just think that they are people whose lives have been made miserable for some reason. And it's just like the school bully, isn't it? They just want to kick out somewhere, and they're being told that the EU are responsible for their crap lives. And you know, and so that's where they're told to direct their hatred that way. And of course, we as Europhiles who have no fear of the EU, we are also a target. You know, because, well, we're talking Britain down, for example. So then we also become targets of that hate. But I just think they're hateful people. And anyone who challenges them, they don't like to be challenged either, because that requires some intellectual effort on their part. And so they don't like that either. You know, I don't really see it as any more than that. It's just their nature, because of their crap life or because of their indoctrination or whatever.
Max, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think if you look at videos where you're talking about, for example, Meghan Markle, or if you're looking at videos in regards to immigration or any particular topic, you'll find these types of comments as well, where they, as Phil said, they're hateful people. They have very miserable lives. They have maybe a lot of time on their hands, and they need to hate something. If it's not single mothers, it's immigrants. If it's not that, it's the EU. And we have to remember that these people they've had poison poured into their ears for decades by the likes of the Sun or the Daily Mail or the Express. And if you look at some of the articles, and I've covered in some of the videos, the article headline will say one thing, the article itself will say something else. But the majority of the viewers or the readers don't actually read the content of the article. They just read the headline, and they share it around social media. And I think social media has a large part to play here, because if you hate a certain group of people, Facebook, in order to keep you on the platform, will continue to share you that type of content. But yeah, I've tried to engage with some of these people, but 9 times out of 10, it's a waste of time, because they're not actually interested in having a debate or having a discussion. They just want to get your attention.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Okay, got a couple of questions from Trevor H, who's just put in the text that he sent a couple of questions, so that must be him. So hi, Trevor. First of all, I think this is a good one. What is /are the first steps that the people should do to get behind rejoining the EU? I'll put that to Max first, and then we'll go to Phil.
Well, I think you need to get a party, a pro-European party, into power first. So you need, and the only party that has the possibility of truly rejoining the European Union is the Labour Party. I think, first of all, you need to get the Labour Party into power, maybe a coalition with the Liberal Democrats or the Greens, and then convince them to push for a proportional representation or whatever, but that needs to be the first step, to get a pro-European party into power. That's what I would say is the first step to take. And then after that, campaign, convince them that rejoining is the best way. Like I've talked about also how people like Keir Starmer or members of the Labour Party need to go out and meet with people who have been affected directly by Brexit. For example, the fishing communities, go and meet with them, explain to them that the reason that you're suffering is because of Brexit. The solution to that is rejoining the single market and the customs union at least, or rejoining the European Union.
Okay, and then over to Phil. I just want to just put into that as well. Maybe to Phil, so he doesn't just say the same thing. Obviously, I don't think that Labour can win in the next election without doing a coalition, with going in some kind of group with coalition with the other parts, the opposition parties. Do you see a path to Labour actually getting into power if they don't embrace that and embrace electoral reform?
I mean, because yes, I am going to agree with everything Max has just said there, and then I would add in join the Labour Party, because the Labour Party will never be anti-European, but it's as pro-European as its members. So the more pro-European members there are, the more pro-European it will be. But yes, I agree. See, on the one hand, yes, I do not see a route to Labour winning as such. They don't need to win. They just need to stop the Conservatives winning. The Parliament that we had last time, if we got that again, the parties would actually work together. They didn't before because partly to do with personalities and arrogance and all the rest of it. I think they will have been chastened now. But I also agree, Labour absolutely need to have a progressive alliance. They cannot allow, because this is an extreme Tory government, and the damage that's already been done, we've got several more years. We've got 3.5 more years. Goodness knows where we're going to be after that time. Labour cannot afford to take anything to chance at all. I don't care what the polls say at the time, even if it looks like they maybe do okay. It will never show them going to get a stonking majority. That's impossible. It's impossible. But I also understand they can't form a progressive alliance now. There is opposition within Labour to that, and it will be taken as the leadership being defeatist about their chances. Like, well, if you're not even going to try and win the next general election, why are you in charge? But I think come the time, they need to join up with the Liberal Democrats and the Green Party. They talk about, Labour would have to change their constitution. Well, they did that with Tony Blair just before they won. Why not? That should be easy to do. And then don't split your vote unnecessarily. Absolute madness. The Conservatives won that stonking majority by winning about 100 seats by a small margin. A small margin. So a progressive alliance has to be part of it. And by the time we get close to the election, and it doesn't have to be miles away, it can be 4 months away, but 6 months away might be more comfortable. Anyone in the party moaning about it just needs to be told to sit down and shut up at that point, because it's too important. So yes, progressive alliance, and then after that, your route to rejoin. They won't campaign on a manifesto of rejoin the EU, but they will campaign on manifesto of electoral reform. I just don't know what that means. I want it to mean reform of Westminster politics, not just the devolved assemblies and parliaments. So because your route has to be proportional representation, I don't mean, any other rubbish. Proportional representation. I know there's different kinds of that. And rejoining the customs union single market. Those are the milestones on the way to getting back into the EU, because that's not going to be a quick road now.
Do you feel like the result of the upcoming Hartlepool by-election, which might end up being a bit of a bloodbath for Labour, do you think that might change the thinking? Because they do seem very much like doubling down on, we don't work with other parties, as we saw this week.
That was an absolute madness. Especially if you're referencing the move by Caroline Lucas and others to have a motion against Boris Johnson's lying, and Keir Starmer didn't get on it. Well, Labour don't normally support other parties' initiatives. It's like, well, one, not normally supporting doesn't mean you don't support it. So why aren't you supporting this? And two, grow up. Something's a good idea. It's a good idea, for goodness sake. I don't understand the thinking that some of the strategy I can appreciate is maybe with more long-term thinking in mind than short-term, but something like that was just silly. I don't know, because if they've already decided I could tell from PMQs today that Keir Starmer, I could sort of see a strategy in terms of how he's going to campaign in Hartlepool, but it was lost in 2019. It was the Brexit party that helped Labour win about 20 seats. They would have lost even more. I think that Starmer and his strategists have a long-term view, and as a result, they're probably unlikely to be swayed by a short-term speed bump, as they might see it. It would be lovely for them to be chastened by that, but I would just say they're going to be too busy putting out fires within Labour, because you've already got people before Starmer was even leader calling for him to be removed. And they will use this as definitive proof he should. They will be calling for him to be kicked out of the leadership because he lost a by-election. I shudder to think what they would want to do to a leader that lost dozens of safe Labour seats, but there you go.
Well, indeed. So J.A. Ferguson's asked, when will Keir Starmer become the opposition leader? So we'll come back to that. So the second question from Trevor, and we'll leave it with Phil for first. He says, can you see a momentum from farmers, fishermen and exporters to force the Tories to rejoin? Can you see that?
No. At the moment, they're not doing anything. What are they doing? I mean, some fishermen drove a few empty lorries into London. In France, they would have blockaded Downing Street or something. I remember, what was it, about 20 years ago, with people with lorries who blockaded oil refineries. It turns out we had like 2 in the whole country. That brought the country to a standstill over, VAT on fuel. And I said at the time, this was last year when we were in the transition period, and farmers were starting to be turned on to the fact that it was going to be really, really bad for them, Brexit. And I thought, it's a shame you haven't got any heavy machinery you can use to blockade strategically important sites in the country then, isn't it? But they didn't do that. They drove some tractors down a road in London, which is quite busy anyway, I gather. So they're not even within their own sectors doing anything. It's like they don't know how to protest. It's like, they just don't even know how to protest. So then the idea that they'll work together on some mega protest just seems ridiculous to me, because they don't know what they're doing.
Should we send them over to France on a fact-finding mission?
Maybe we should.
Learn how to protest.
Tell them not to burn any sheep. But yeah.
Max, what do you think? Do you think we could see momentum for farmers, fishermen? What about them actually joining the Rejoin cause, or at least closer ties with the EU? Because that's what we're pushing for at the moment, to get back into the single market and the customs union. So that's the first step towards, one of the steps towards rejoining.
I really don't know what they want, because I was convinced that when Brexit happened, these people would have been up in arms. They would have been protesting. They would have been driving their tractors into the centre of London. But they're not even angry with Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage spent years courting these people. And then in the run up to the election, to the referendum, he was there in the port, these fishing ports, meeting with farmers and others on a weekly basis. And the people, when they're asked, are they angry? Yes, we're angry. Who are you angry with? With the European Union. So they're not actually angry with the people who lied to them. So I think until they're convinced that the people who lied to them are the problem, I think it's going to be very difficult to convince these people to come out and protest. And it's going to be even more difficult to convince them to come out and to join to rejoin the European Union. But I'm just dumbfounded how these people continue to blame the European Union when Nigel Farage was telling them everything is going to be great. It wasn't nuanced. It was everything is going to be great. As soon as we leave the European Union, you're going to be able to catch as much fish as you want. You'll be able to continue to export them. Don't worry about that. And they don't have either of those, and they're still not angry with Nigel Farage or Boris Johnson. They're angry with Boris Johnson's deal, but they're not actually angry with Nigel Farage. And I really don't understand how that's possible. I don't know if maybe Phil wants to say something there. I can see he's.
No, I agree. It's an absolute madness, but it's because the first step to solving a problem is to understand the problem, and they don't understand the problem because they still think the problem is the EU. You know, as people keep saying, if you thought the problem was the EU when we were in the EU, how can it still be the problem when we're out of the EU? And if you thought the problem is the EU when we were in the EU, and it's still the problem when we've left the EU, leaving the EU wasn't the solution, was it? And until you can sort of say to people that and get them to work that through their minds, and I don't know what you can do, but you'd have to individually go around millions of people, it seems, because we don't have a media that's posing these questions to people en masse.
Okay, next question for the two of you. I'll put it to Phil first since she's still on. It's great to see Mr. Different Bias and Mr. Maximilien Robespierre team up. Strange names to be born with. A match made in heaven, no less. But last time you mostly just agreed with each other. Has any of you ever thought of doing a matchup or live debate with someone sensible, in inverted commas? I don't know how sensible you're going to find this, from the other side of the political divide. I'm a fan of David Pakman's program, and he does very well in debating people who don't share his liberal views. Any interest? That's from Tom.
I had one person who asked to debate with me, and then I said yes, and then I never heard from them again. I'm not someone who typically goes out and finds people to, like, people have to ask me. I'm a terrible introvert. If people wanted to, then that's fine. But yeah,
So if Grassroots
again, it's
Europe
like
set that up,
it's like, yeah, well, it's who do you call sensible? Because the problem with this particular thing is that each side thinks that the other side is absolutely barking or lying. So to have a debate based on mutual respect might be rather tricky.
What do you think, Max? Would you do? You've got someone who's on your Discord server.
I actually, yes. Yeah, no, well, no, not a lurker. No, I did actually have a debate with him about Brexit, and no, it was a very civil debate we had. Well, it wasn't really a debate; it was more a conversation. But I would be definitely willing to have a conversation, even just a conversation with somebody, because my first question, of course, would be, why did you vote for it, and how do you personally benefit from it? And in most cases, the discussion ends there. That's the problem. Unfortunately, I find that when you actually do debate this topic with people, they will start off here and you have to continually ask questions. And unfortunately, and I don't want to paint a brush here, I don't want to tar everyone with the same brush here, but it seems to be the issue at the end of all of this is immigration. People will start off saying we wanted to take back control of our money or our borders or our laws or whatever. But when you start scratching the surface, it comes down to basically, well, I don't like, people speaking a different language or with a different accent in ASDA. In regards to the person I debate or had this discussion with, he was very happy with the ending of freedom of movement. And I asked him, yes, but don't you understand that your children are not going to be able to benefit from freedom of movement as well? And he said, well, that's a price worth paying. So at that stage, I said, okay, well, there's nothing more we can say, because you've taken away a benefit from others. You've taken away a benefit that your child has or would have had in the future. And it's worth it because you're stopping other people from coming in.
Okay, so next question, and we'll stick with Max for now. Is the EU stronger now that the UK has left? I'm talking about unity. We can see the harm the EU has caused. The harm we can see the harm leaving the EU has caused the UK, even if EU has had some loss. That's from Paul Clark. So basically, is the EU stronger now that the UK has left?
Some people would say that the UK were used to block a lot of progress in the EU. The UK would block some of the progress that was being made. I actually have always said that the EU is weaker or is worse off without the UK. I think we always benefited from having the UK as a member, and I think it is actually worse off without the UK. Now, in regards to unity, we've seen polling that demonstrates all over Europe. There may be some exceptions, maybe in Poland or in Hungary, but generally throughout the EU, support for the EU has gone up since Brexit. So Brexiteers had said that support for the EU would go down, but it's actually gone in the opposite direction. And we're seeing how even in Ireland, where they're suffering the consequences of Brexit probably more than any other EU nation, support for the EU remains at, I think I read it today, about 80%. So I think the EU has moved on from this. As they said, the star is always there if the UK wants to come back. But I think it has strengthened unity within the European Union. But personally, and I think many Europeans would say this, we're worse off without the UK. We would prefer to have the UK still as a member.
Okay, and Phil, what do you reckon? Is the EU stronger or weaker, or stronger in parts, weaker in parts?
You know, and just to go through some examples. So I know that people, I mean, there's several ways in which it's weaker. First of all, yes, the UK, you know, was very often at odds with things that other EU countries wanted to do. But it was often pointed out that sometimes that was because if you get a load of people who agree on a thing in a room, they're not always that critical about it and they go ahead with it. They see the benefits and don't always see the drawbacks. The UK used to show the drawbacks. The other thing is simply this. The reason why we're going to do so badly out of Brexit economically is we do not have as much buying power as we did as part of the EU. Well, the EU now doesn't have as much buying power as it did. It still has a lot more than many other markets, most other markets, but it has become weaker as a result of that as well. And then you've also got, they've now got a huge economy on their doorstep that is very much against them, and that's going to cause a lot of missteps on both sides along the way. They're in a better position to be able to ride that out. But I mean, we saw the situation, for example, with vaccine nationalism, you know, the threat from the EU for about 6 hours to invoke Article 16. And that is inevitably caused by the fact that they've got an aggressive, huge economy on their doorstep, and they cannot allow the UK to gain any advantages, and that's going to distract them. Whereas it would have been a lot better if we could just work together.
Okay, brilliant. Just to say, normally we have a question thing, but we don't have that tonight. So just leave a question in the chat. But if you can start it with the letter Q, like a big Q, then we'll be able to spot it in the chat, and hopefully we'll have time to ask it. We've been powering through the questions so far, so thank you to both of you. It's just past 8 o'clock. We've got another 55 minutes of this. Are you up for it?
Yeah,
you're not too tired. Okay, good. Right, so the next question has come from Mark, and Mark, he's got three sort of questions here, but first one is, will an independent Scotland become a member of the EU before England, Wales and Northern Ireland realise it has to become a member again? And I'll put that to Phil first and then to Max.
I mean, well, I don't know. The thing to note, Will, that Scotland will not join quickly. There is no quick routes to joining for anyone, for any country ever. It took us a long time to join in the first place. And the process of Scottish independence even, I mean, let us imagine that there were to be a referendum in the next couple of years, and it was a result for independence. The actual process of becoming an independent nation will take several years. It would be very messy. And then the process of rejoining the EU takes many years as well. So this is not something that's going to happen quickly. And politics in what is left, I mean, I know Graham tried to call it Wankland, I don't want to call it that, but whatever we have to call ourselves after that, because it can no longer be the UK, it can't be Britain, because Britain is the landmass, which won't be the whole landmass anymore. I don't know what we're going to be called, but or what our flag's going to look like, but it will force people, particularly in England, to have to reevaluate their sense of nationality. And because there isn't really anyone alive to remember when we weren't the Union. And even though John Redwood looks like he might have been alive at that time. And so politics in the rest of the UK will be in complete flux. So, and I do not know which way that would go. We could either double down on the crazy, or we could wake up from the insanity and realize that the people who were talking about global Britain have completely destroyed that concept forever. And then maybe we would make an act, and maybe we'll face the bizarre situation where Scotland and England and Wales all join on the same day.
That would be quite an interesting thing to see. What do you think, Max, about independent Scotland? How do you figure its chances of joining the EU?
I think it's going to happen, but it's just, as Phil was saying, there's a stage. So first of all, there needs to be this election that needs to take place. The SNP need to win a majority. They need to put pressure on Boris Johnson to allow us another referendum. Then if they win the election, then they're going to push for the referendum. We don't know how long that's going to take before they can actually have the referendum. Then they have the referendum, then there's independence. But there's also a transition. We'll have to take into account the transition period of leaving the UK. So that, what's going to happen there? There's going to be a negotiation between Scotland and Westminster. That's going to take time. And then rejoining the European Union, but rejoining in what way? Would it be joining the EEA? Would it be becoming a full member? So there are many steps to take before Scotland becomes a member of the European Union. I think it's going to happen, but I think it's going to take a long time. In regards to England, I'm really concerned about what's going to happen in the short term, because the Conservatives, without Scotland, it means that the Conservatives are going to benefit in the short term, unless the Labour Party realize this and start working with the other parties like the Lib Dems and the Greens. But I think in the short term, it's going to benefit the Conservative Party. But I think this, and maybe Phil would disagree with me on this, but it's been one of the one of the reasons the Labour Party have not been supporting independence, it seems, because they need the SNP on their side to go against the Tories. But I understand the Scots say, look, that's your fight, it's not ours.
Okay, and still on Mark's questions here. We've got I'll put these two together. Basically, will Greece and Spain have issues with the UK, England, Wales, Northern Ireland, and other countries? Will throw the veto on issues such as Elgin Marbles, Gibraltar, etc., on them rejoining the EU, and also will we become need help from the IMF and become the sick man of Europe before realizing leaving Europe was a bad idea? So two questions there. Are we going to go bankrupt before we rejoin? And if we do rejoin, are we going to get stopped by Greece and Spain? So Max, for you first.
In regards to Spain, well, I think Greece will have some complaints about England rejoining. But in regards to Spain, this has been brought up, that the idea that Catalonia, because Catalonia have been attempting to break away from Spain, Spain would be willing to veto Scotland rejoining the European Union in some manner. I don't think that's the case, because the UK have already left. So it's not it's not the same situation where a part of the UK as a member is breaking away. This is a completely different situation in respect to Catalonia. And also Catalonia is a region, it's not another country. So in regards to, I think in the short term, when it comes to artifacts, historical monuments, or sorry, historical artifacts, there's going to be a bit of a hargy-bargy getting these things back. That's where we put our hope in diplomacy. But once again, the wrong people are in charge at the moment.
Yeah,
so,
they're not particularly diplomatic, are they?
No.
Okay, over to Phil. What do you think?
I mean, the Spain thing, I would say, see, I keep thinking that they would make a hell of a fuss over Gibraltar, and then I'm assured that, you know, I mean, we don't know what the government would be. The government at the moment probably wouldn't. You can also look at it like, yes, in theory, an individual nation has a veto and could use it. But if the rest of the EU would want us to rejoin, and we are a large economy, and obviously people keep saying, but they wouldn't want us to rejoin as we are now because we're dickheads. But we wouldn't be if we wanted to rejoin. You know, we'd have had to have grown and matured as a country to even want to rejoin. So we're talking about whatever, Wangland, why not? That is pro-European again. And I think the rest of them would lean on Spain and say, will you stop it, will you? Because they're not going to do it. Now, when it comes to Greece, yeah, I mean, I think, of course, they would say, well, we want our marbles back. And to be honest, I think we would just give them back, because at the end of the day, it's just rocks. It's not really that big a deal. You can argue the toss either way. I don't see how we would. Again, we're talking about, we're in a situation where we recognize that we need to rejoin for our own economic survival. And at that point, are the public going to allow the government to say no to that because we won't hand over this rock that's in a museum? I don't believe that. So Greece would absolutely get the marbles back. I get told off when I call them the Elgin marbles. But
Parthenon
yeah.
marbles.
I'd say the marbles. So we'll lose our marbles, and that will be fine. But I don't see, Gibraltar changing hands as such. But who knows?
Okay, I've got Ed with his hand up, so let's see if Ed wants to come in. Ed, are you there? Can you unmute?
I am here. I don't know if can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Do you want to ask a question?
Nice. Yeah, I have two quick questions. I mean, so sorry, you can hear the American accent. I'm not so in touch with all the UK politics and everything. However, I was very much campaigning against the topic of, Brexit and all these. And so I have two quick questions about, essentially, one is, how much awareness do we have here about like the court cases with EU citizenship and like the law behind this? Because even though Brexit happened, I can very much point you to research about there could still be a way to rescue the EU citizenship for Brits. Secondly, this touches on party politics, but what's the overall feeling about something like Volt? I brought this up because, again, I know from friends in the UK, there's a lot of talk about, about Labour, Conservatives, all these things that I'm so much unaware of. So my two questions are the thoughts about keeping EU citizenship or somehow rescuing it, and what the general consensus might be about something like Volt, which is trying to be pan-European.
Okay, Phil, do you want to talk about Volt? What do you think about that pan-European political party and how that could work in the UK?
The problem is that there are an awful lot of xenophobes in the UK, even though, I don't believe that the vast majority are. There's a very large minority that are very noisy about it. And the idea, I mean, we're not even in a position where we have a vocal enough majority who are screaming at the government to rejoin the EU. Or even rejoin the customs union single market. It should be immediate. It should be, look, the situation was as dire as was predicted. What are you doing? What are you doing? The fact that the Conservatives, will win a by-election probably next month and will probably not be killed in local elections as well. And that just says to me that there's the people who want to keep Europe on a 10-foot barge pole are still the noise, the people who are representing us to the world. So we can't even have Erasmus, for goodness sake. We can't even have schemes that are just purely of mutual benefit, absolutely of mutual benefit. Whereas when you talk about a party, the larger the party, the more factions are within it. And everyone knows there's always one faction that becomes dominant. So, and that's bad enough when it's a national party. I mean, a pan-national party would be like, well, who's going to become dominant? What if the German faction becomes dominant? So the sun would go mad. So no, I don't really see that taking off in this country at the moment. We have an awful lot of introspection to do before we could possibly do that. And I'm afraid I've forgotten the second part of the question.
I think that the second part was about Volt, and the first one was just about what we can do to reclaim our EU citizenship.
Oh, see, I don't know much, but I do keep seeing myself reports about, could we still have some of these rights? I mean, I'm not a legal expert. I don't see how. I know Guy Verhofstadt was quite keen on doing a deal on it, but it would still require the UK government to engage with it, which they're not going to at the moment. But in terms of any legal claims to it, although I've seen reports myself, I don't understand them.
Okay, and over to Max for that.
In regards to the EU citizenship rights, I think the problem with this is that if you're not contributing to the state in some way, the EU does not want to be involved with that. They don't want to satisfy that request, in the sense that I think it's in Estonia where you can get digital rights or something like digital citizenship if you're starting a business while living outside the country. I would love to have the idea. I would love the idea of British citizens also having European Union citizenship. But I think from the European Union's point of view, these people are not contributing to the EU. It would be a sort of tokenism. In regards to Volt and pan-European parties, I'm not a big fan of parties. I think it would be better a movement, because the problem with the party is that with a movement, you can focus on one thing, focus on rejoining the European Union. Just that must be the end game. If you look at what's happening in Scotland, there are many movements and there are many parties, but their objective at the moment is independence. When you start introducing other topics, so you, for example, pan-European party, okay, well, what's your stance on the environment? What's your stance on this? And then it starts breaking down, and it's difficult to keep everyone on board. If you look at also what the Brexiteers did, the Brexiteers had one goal: get out of the European Union. That was it. And they said, that's all we have to achieve. If you ask the Brexit party what's their stance on the environment, they have some stances, but they don't go into detail about any of this. Their objective was always get out. And I think our objective must be to get in, to get the UK back in. Details, I wouldn't go down the party line. Influencing parties, definitely. Influence the Green Party, influence the Labour Party, influence parties in Europe, but not a party of Rejoin. I don't know if I'm answering the question, the original question correctly, though.
It'll do. Right. So next question I've got from Alex Campbell. Hello, Alex. Which is, what do you think will be the catalyst for people wanting to rejoin the EU / single market / customs union? And when do you think we might rejoin the customs union, if that's something that might happen? To you, Max, first.
I don't know if the question is for Wangland or for the UK.
Well, it says catalyst for people want. It just says people. So
people in general. Well, let's say with the UK in
rejoin EU / single market / customs union. Obviously, they're pretty big different things. But I'd lump the customs union and single market together.
So, what is the motivation? I think people need to suffer, and I don't like to say that, but I think people need to suffer the consequences of Brexit, and then they will realize this is not what we wanted. This is not what we were promised. A fear I have is that because Brexit in a way is like a slow puncture, that it wasn't as dramatic as many people expected it to be. Of course, it's terrible, but it wasn't as dramatic as people expected. if we look back at Operation Yellowhammer, where they were talking about, fuel fuel not being brought into the UK or whatever, it was extremely dramatic. Because people haven't seen that, they don't believe that Brexit is as bad as they had been promised. And I think in that regards, people are, the general public I'm not talking about people who are on board with rejoining, or people who are informed about what's happening, but the general public look around and say, well, things haven't really changed. So it's going to be quite difficult to convince them. And, if they lose their job, if they see how, they travel abroad and, welcome to the Brexit, sir, when you try to travel with your sandwich. These are small things, but I think accumulation of those perhaps will convince people. It's going to take a long time. Unfortunately, because it's been somewhat of a slow puncture, the impact of what's required to convince people to rejoin will take some time.
What do you think, Phil? What do you think the catalyst?
There's two things. Like Max has said, people need to see that the current situation is extremely bad. And they also need to recognise what the problem is. I mean, someone in the chat, Alex Pilkington, has just noted there that we're still in the grace period. At the moment, the fuel shortages, the food shortages, all of those would be with us if we were attempting in our Keystone Cops way to carry out the same checks on goods coming into Britain as are having to take place as they leave it to, say, the Netherlands or to France. Northern Ireland's a little bit more nuanced at the moment. We don't have that. And so, because if we did, if the reason why, the government said, oh, those checks they were going to put some checks in place this month and some others in July. The reason they haven't done that is because there would be massive food shortages at just the time they want restaurants and pubs to fully open again. And people would notice that. So people have to notice the harm, as Matt says, but they also have to see what the problem is, because where some people are at the moment, they were told that Brexit would be wonderful, would be taking back control. We're clearly not, but people aren't being told, oh yeah, we sort of got it wrong. They're being told, no, Brexit is wonderful. The EU are being difficult about it. All these things that are happening are because the EU won't have it. The reason, we used to be able to pass these live bivalve mollusks class category B to the EU, and now we can't. So the reason we can't is because they're being difficult. They're spiteful and resentful, and they're just being mean. So the problem is still the EU to a lot of these people. They need to see that actually, no, the problem is with us and our government. And also it needs to hurt them enough that if people are under enough pain, whether that's job losses and they can't get another job, which leads to family breakup and all the rest of it, if they're in a situation, people like that don't care about political arguments. They care about who's going to fix it. And if the government's not going to fix it, then they might vote for someone who says, well, we will fix it, and we will fix it by rejoining the customs union single market.
Oh, what a day that'll be. So a bit of levity now. This is the second part, well, the third part actually, of Alex's question is, anyone think that the ongoing Brexit drama will make a good carry-on film? Who would you want your antagonist to be played by? I'll put that to Phil first.
Oh, dead. Jim Dale might still be alive. They're all dead. Can't do that.
Okay, say we could magically bring Sid James back to life.
Oh, he never played the villain. It was always poor old Kenneth Williams. But he did do a good villain. He played Robespierre, Kenneth Williams.
He did? Was it the Black Fingernail?
It was Carry On, Don't Lose Your Head.
That's the one.
Yeah. I mean, it would have to be Kenneth Williams. He was always, occasionally Kenneth Connor did it, but Kenneth Williams is always the best one.
Max, who in the modern British actors, I guess, would you want seeing in a carry-on film about Brexit?
I can't think of any modern actors, but I was just thinking Sid James playing a bad guy. I know he didn't actually play, but he would play good Nigel Farage, I think.
Oh dear. Okay, we've got Charlie Nelson's got his hand up. So Charlie, you're going to be on in a moment. Don't take too long asking your question. All right, here we go. All right, go.
Okay, right, a couple of things. Yeah, yesterday I was involved in a webinar with Neil Richmond, the TD from Ireland, and we were talking about the Irish Protocol, and my question to him and to the other panelists, who consisted of people like Tony Connolly and Emma D'Souza. Anyway, the question was, would the problems with the Irish Protocol result in the UK becoming more aligned with the EU and potentially result in us rejoining the single market and customs union in the future to solve the problem? Their answer was, Neil and Tony's answer was no, because of the absolute sovereignty thing coming from the government. But I just want to know what you two think.
Okay, can we have that on Phil first?
I mean, the issue is, of course, trade with Northern Ireland. For goods, it's easier to align with the Republic of Ireland, and for services, less so. But the problems are, although they're not completely solved just by joining the customs union single market, all of the very visible problems that people have with the Northern Ireland Protocol would be solved by that. And more than that, it's the only way to solve them. You know, joining the EEA is actually the only way to solve these problems. And then people will talk about other things. Well, what if Ireland reunified? Well, I mean, we had, I've got to get this right now because I keep getting told off, Micheál Martin, maybe. Even he was saying that he does not see a border poll anytime soon being anything other than divisive and explosive. So can we not? But even if that was a thing, that doesn't solve the problem, because the problem is goods passing from Britain to Northern Ireland, not the other way around. From Northern Ireland to Britain, not a problem. You know, we've got every other border open. Why not that one? That still becomes a problem, because all of a sudden Northern Ireland is not part of the UK anymore, and that trade friction is still there. It's just that on that occasion, it would not be the UK government managing both sides of the border, so there would be less political argy-bargy. There is no way to solve the problem without rejoining the EEA. And even if the EU exploded, let's say every Brexiteer's wet dream that the EU actually fractured and collapsed overnight, just like the Super League, and all of the individual countries are back to being individual countries, we still don't solve the problem, because those trade barriers are due to being a third country. Everyone in Europe would then be a third country. So we'd have even more problems, actually. There is no way, if you want to reduce trade barriers, you have to join a closer union that exists specifically to reduce trade barriers. It's as simple as that.
Okay, Max, you got anything to add to that? Or
Not really, but just some examples were, for example, in large consignments, they have decided in Northern Ireland to import from the Republic of Ireland or from the EU through the Republic of Ireland. So they've already decided, excuse me, they've already decided some products from the UK are no longer viable. So we're going to source them from the EU via Ireland, the Republic. One example was orange juice, where there was a half a pallet, I think it was, where they decided, look, at this stage, at this moment, it's just no longer viable. It was coming from, I think it was coming from the UK. It was some convoluted way of how it was going from Spain, I think, to the UK, Spain to Great Britain, and then back to the Republic of Ireland, then into Northern Ireland. I don't remember exactly, but for small consignments, it's no longer viable. For larger ones, they're just sourcing it from the EU and from the Republic of Ireland. I think that's what's going to happen. It's just businesses in Northern Ireland are going to say, look, it's no longer viable. If I want to survive, I have to source suppliers in the Republic or in the EU. I think it'll be a gradual process away from sourcing in Great Britain, from Great Britain, but those who can survive will, and those who can't will just close.
Okay, brilliant. We're coming up to 8:30 now, so we've got half an hour left of the chat. If anyone wants to throw in any late questions, I'd like to move the conversation a little bit towards social media, because obviously Phil and Max use social media a lot. They're quite famous on YouTube amongst us rejoiners, and if you want to ask them a few questions about their sort of the journey along that road, that would be great. In the meantime, we've got a question about Boris Johnson. Yay! Okay, and his saucy text messages. By the way, we've had some suggestions for the Carry On film. We've had Hattie Jakes playing Adam Widdicombe, and we've got the fact that Sid played Dick Turpin in Carry On Dick. So the people want Sid James to play Nigel Farage because he's got the right dirty laugh. Okay, so back to Boris Johnson. Is Boris Johnson or any other Conservative leader simply delaying the inevitable split within the Tory party? And that's to Max first.
Yes. I see that probably the Conservative Party will return to its original roots, the hard right and the moderates. Boris Johnson is holding it together because of Brexit. Brexit, for many people, is a success for within the Conservative Party, I think. But I think they're also maintaining Boris Johnson because they know that when things eventually go badly, they can offload the responsibility onto him. I think someone stepping forward would be probably Michael Gove or Rishi Sunak. I put my money on Rishi Sunak being the next prime minister. Of course, he'll have to take some of the responsibility of Brexit, but it'll be easier for him to just say, look, that was Boris Johnson's fault. Everything that's going badly is Boris Johnson's fault. But I do see perhaps an approach to court once again the moderates. But I'm not an expert on the Conservative Party. I think Phil would have a better take on it.
Okay, Phil, do you think that the split in the Tory party is inevitable?
I actually think it's impossible. As it's often said, the reason why the splits in Labour are always there is because they believe they're fighting principles, and they will attack anyone within the party that they see as not having the same principles as them. In the Conservative Party, the principle is power. They have their little battles, but at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, they all rally together because they know that unity is strength. It's the only thing they know that's of any value. They cannot afford to split because they know if they split, no more, even with first past the post, no power if they split their own vote. They benefit from the fact that look what happened in 2019. If any of them needed a lesson, 2019 showed the power of the vote being split, because if the Brexit Party had actually stood candidates in every single constituency and campaigned as they promised to, they had no chance. Boris Johnson had absolutely no chance whatsoever. So, we can see that they will not do that. The only way I could see the Conservative Party splitting, ironically, is with proportional representation, because at that point, I'd see the Labour splitting for the same reason. At that point, they would go, well, there's nothing to be lost by having a hard right Republican-style nutter party and having a more moderate, centre-right party, more, but at the moment, with first past the post, it's electoral suicide to split. So, okay. This is what happened as well. The reason, the ERG, for example, are not really conservatives as most traditional conservatives would see them. They are insurrectionists. They infiltrated the party because they couldn't form their own party because they couldn't possibly have succeeded. So they took over the Conservative Party to achieve power.
True. Okay, thanks, Phil. Right, I'm just going to go to Valerio, who's had his hand up for a while. So if you want to come in there, Valerio, I'll unmute you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Do you want to ask your question to Phil and or Max?
Yeah, what an honor, by the way. What an honor. So I would like to ask you, but for example, if Biden will be very direct and straight with Boris, with the situation in Ireland and so on, do you think it's possible that it can suddenly change the UK policy towards EU, if we can say it policy? I can say mostly non-policy, I can say. What do you think? Considering that Biden is always saying that he's an Irish, so he always says that. So
should we throw that over to Max first then? Max, what do you think is going to be the consequences of Biden's Irish roots on Britain going forward?
Actually, I don't think it's going to have a huge impact because Boris Johnson will want a trade deal, so he's not going to mess around with Northern Ireland. We've seen this with the Northern Ireland Secretary, Brandon Lewis. Every time in Parliament, he's saying, yes, we're maintaining the protocol. We're going to protect the protocol. We're not going to undermine the Good Friday Agreement. And they haven't done anything to affect the Good Friday Agreement at the moment. They've, of course, taken steps to break international law in a very limited and specific way. But at the end of the day, I don't think they're going to do anything that would upset the Good Friday Agreement. And following on from that, they're not going to try to undermine their chances with having a trade deal with the US. I think it was Phil who had said, I don't want to be stealing from Phil here, but I think it was Phil that said that the likelihood is that they won't actually have a trade deal with a US-UK trade deal until probably 2022, because in 2022 there are the midterm elections, and Biden would like to have some trade deal achieved at that stage, which doesn't help the UK at the moment because it's another year and a half away. But I think when it comes to Northern Ireland, it's not going to really affect the UK's position with the European Union. But in other regards, I don't know.
Okay, Phil, what do you think Biden's effect on the UK will be?
Well, I mean, like Matt says, Boris Johnson will not want to push too far. He might feel comfortable maddeningly cocking a snoop at the EU, but the United States is a different matter. He needs that trade deal. It wasn't me that said 2022, by the way, because I'm not even convinced then. Biden's been, I mean, he did say he doesn't want any trade deals until America is in a stronger position, acknowledging that even like the strongest economy in the world can still be in a stronger position and therefore get a better deal. Obviously, he doesn't seem to understand. All he has to do is say to Boris Johnson, here's the deal, sign it, and he'll have it. But there's the G7. I mean, I keep coming to the G7 meeting in June. Presumably President Biden is going to be next to Prime Minister Boris Johnson at lecterns, where they go through the intention is to go through all the usual rubbish about the special relationship. That could be a somewhat different affair if Boris Johnson is still talking about suspending the Northern Ireland Protocol, whether temporarily or permanently at that point. So I still think it's surely likely that at some point next month, Boris Johnson has to fundamentally change his position. Otherwise, and it's not just about Biden being seen as a very, very strongly Irish American in terms of his identity. The Irish lobby group in America is very powerful. We don't really have much of a British lobby group there. We've always seen our diplomacy efforts towards the US as cozying up to the president, not Congress. We've not really had much. Don't even know what Capitol Hill is, most people. You say Capitol Hill, what's the relevance of that for American politics? Most people don't know. They know the White House. Some people even know that it's the White House because we set fire to it. But we don't know anything about Capitol Hill. So, that's the issue. It's like, even if we were international diplomacy isn't about right or wrong, it's about power and influence. Even if we were in the right, we don't have that power and influence in the United States, but we're not in the right either. So there's absolutely zero way we're going to get anything until we start complying.
Okay, so Maxin Lux has had his physical hand up for ages. So do you want to come in, Max, and ask a question quickly? Thanks. There you go.
Yes,
we can hear you. We can hear you.
Thank you very much. You wanted to get onto the social media aspect, Graham. My question to Phil and Max, the imposter Max, my name is Max. Do you feel that you are reaching more than the circle who would automatically tune into you, who would agree with you? Do you feel you're having an effect on people outside the bubble or the echo chamber, if you will? People will naturally gravitate to information or news sources that they have an affinity with. Do you feel that either of you are making any kind of difference to the people who would not normally be agreeing with you?
I'll put that to Max first. Thank you very much, other Max.
Thank you, Max. Yes, I think there's I can't say for Phil, but for my channel, most of the people who are on the Discord server, or most people who are on the channel, tend to agree with me. When I look at the data from YouTube, the videos get about 99.7% likes, which means that most of the people watching it agree with me, and that's a problem. I'd like to reach out. I'd like to reach out to others. I need to find another way to do that. I have invited people on to speak with me on Discord, although that can be maybe a bit intimidating. It would be good to meet with people who disagree with me, but it is right, and I think this is a problem with social media, that people tend to flock and gather around people they agree with and avoid people they disagree with. It's I don't know how we can overcome this problem. If you look at the pro-Brexit channels as well, they have the same issue. Most of the people who are viewing those channels, and you can sometimes see it when you watch a video, talk radio video, for example, you'll see this is viewed by Jeff Taylor viewers, for example. So you can see how the same people watch the same content, and there's very little overlap. I think we need to find ways to reach out to people who disagree with us. I'll let Phil answer that as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. I mean, first of all, like I said before, with you know, if you look at the two sides of Brexit, it's, you know, if you can only have a reasoned debate if your opinions are different, but you accept certain objective facts. You know, if you can recognize an objective fact as an objective fact. In Brexit, you can't. Each side thinks that the other is mad or lying. And so if you were to watch someone doing a video on the other side, it just makes you madder and madder because you think they're either thick or lying. And so people, you know, if I look, you know, YouTube analytics has some interesting information. Other channels that your audience watches: Maximilien Robespierre, LBC, David Pacman Show, Bowler Hatman, TLDR News. And it's these sorts of channels that most of my viewers watch. And just like Max was talking about, I frequently get 98% likes. And I can't believe that that's an awful lot of former Brexit supporters that have watched my videos and go, oh, fair enough, I didn't think of it that way, I'm now a rejoiner. That would be marvelous. In terms of that, that's all I can tell about the impact. I don't really know if I am making a big difference. I like to think if I'm making a difference at all, it is arming people who are already fighting for the cause, who are having debates with others who are not, with another perspective or an argument or a way of looking at things. So I see the value as potentially being like that. I present in my views as if I were talking sometimes to someone who still thinks Brexit's a great idea, or that Boris Johnson is a great idea, or that Jacob Rees-Mogg is an acceptable idea, and just arming them for their conversations.
Yeah, if you hadn't said that, I was going to say that, because back when I was doing Three Blokes in the Pub, people will come up to me and say, thank you for what you're doing, because you're giving us the things to say when the Brexiteers come out with the nonsense they've read in the Daily Mail. They've got the ammunition to hit back at them and say that's not true because of X, Y, Z. So yeah, and that's important. No matter, you know, whether you can branch out in the bubble of social media to these people is one thing, but being able to pass the message on is something that's sort of outside your control, but it must go on out there. Okay, so staying on the media, kind of, we've got a question from Robert, and he wants to know, what do you think of the BBC's position on the consequences of Brexit? Are they giving a fair representation? I'll throw that over to Phil first.
God, no. I mean, I was just saying today, well, I wasn't saying it today, but you watched it today sometimes, you know, they just had an article this week, the BBC, where Boris Johnson is talking about the Northern Ireland Protocol and how the Northern Ireland Protocol suggests this, I can't remember the exact words now, but unfettered access for trade. It shouldn't, you know, the purpose of it is not to impact trade. which is nonsense. If you read the Northern Ireland Protocol, it says nothing in this protocol is against unfettered access for the travel of goods from Northern Ireland to Britain, not the other way around. The protocol is full of trade barriers from Britain to Northern Ireland. And the BBC should have called that out. They should have said that it's a bit like, you know, when Trump was lying about the election, and lots of media in this country were calling out what this orange lunatic is saying is disputed. I mean, that was the polite way of putting it. Some media were actually going as far as to saying it's absolute horseshit. And so they weren't doing that. They weren't calling out the fact that what he was saying was an objective lie. And then they added their own lie into it as well by talking about Article 16 as allowing either London or Brussels to unilaterally suspend the Northern Ireland Protocol, which it does not. Article 16 doesn't do that at all. I mean, I can read it and say, it doesn't say there it can do that, but I don't rely on myself. I'm not legally trained, but I can read what legally trained people have said about it, and they go, no, that's not what it's for at all. So they're deliberately misrepresenting aspects of the Northern Ireland Protocol, which is the most divisive aspect of it at the moment. And I hesitate to say, well, the BBC have been pro-Brexit from the start. They gave Nigel Farage a platform when their own editorial guidelines suggested, sorry, Nige, mate, you don't really have much political standing. We can give you 5 minutes every 3 months or something. But both sides say that, don't they? The Brexiteers say that the BBC are pro-European, and then the other side say this is, which is it? So I think you have to point out where the BBC reports something that is verifiably a misrepresentation of something.
Yeah. Okay. Max, what do you watch the BBC much, or are you just basically on the website a bit? I mean, do you see much of it?
Most of it I get is on YouTube or on Twitter. But I do see a parallel with when Phil was talking about how Nigel Farage was on almost all the time. I see a parallel here in Italy with Matteo Salvini, where he represents a significant part of the electorate. But previously, when his party was polling at, or when his party had 3% of the vote, he was on TV all the time. There are other parties that are with even less of a representation in Parliament, and they're on TV all the time. I think, unfortunately, the media have, and I don't know if I'm, accurately criticizing the BBC here, but there is this attempt to create some sort to gain attention of viewers. So while the BBC used to be objective, it seems to, in a sense, be following clicks and likes. And I hope I'm wrong here, but put Nigel Farage on TV and people will watch. It doesn't matter whether he's representative of the electorate or not, because he wasn't an MP. Yes, he was an MEP, but his party was tiny in respect to in comparison to the Conservatives or the Labour Party. So I can't see the justification for putting Nigel Farage on Newsnight almost every night. I'd love to know the justification for that, but I think the justification really was it gets people to view it, which is not the approach the BBC should have.
No, I think I would probably add in as well. And there's two ways to look at that. And a lot of people, I can see some people in the chat are looking at it as the BBC is disgraceful and we shouldn't pay the license fee. And you can look at it like that, and you can say it is disgraceful and it shouldn't be that way, but it is the way it is. I like to be pragmatic. So then you'd say, well, what is the solution? And perhaps the solution is that the likes of the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats and other progressive parties recognise that reality and start to do more about it themselves. How do they become more engaging to fight back?
Cool. Okay, we've got a question from Richard Prosser, which was, I think we maybe answered it before. It's like, what impact do we have via social media? Is there anything you want to add to what you were just saying before, Phil, about sort of who you reach out to? I could actually join this up from a question we got in the chat from Chris, who says, the Brexiteers seem to have won the social media battle over the referendum. What do you think rejoiners can do to win the next social media battle, and how can we in the EU help?
I mean, what happened with Brexiteers is a long time ago, like every terrible organization that does awful things to humanity, they were a joke and they were ridiculed. And they were there were so many little pockets and they were all fighting amongst each other because they all wanted us to leave the EU, but they wanted it for different reasons and they disagreed violently about those reasons. And then they all sat down and went, do you know what? This is getting us nowhere. We need to all just agree that we all want to leave the EU. Stop talking about what happens after then, which is why, of course, none of them were able to give a coherent plan for what should happen afterwards, because none of them would be in power anyway. So we sort of need to do the same thing. I don't mean not have a coherent plan, but effectively work together. You know, what was happening at the crucial point of 2019, when if we'd have just resisted that general election, we now would have had that referendum, because there was, you know, MPs, the people I've spoken to have told me there was a growing view amongst MPs, the only way out of this mess was another referendum. The general election was the last gasp effort to deal with it another way. If that hadn't have happened, if we hadn't have had that general election, by now we would have had that other referendum, because it was the only way forward. It was complete stalemate, where people would have voted to stay, and that would have been it. Brexit actually would have been done in the very real sense. But that didn't happen. And what was happening in 2019 at that crucial point is we had Remain groups basically fighting amongst themselves, you know, and it needs to be coordinated. And I know different people are going to have different ideas. People will have different ideas about the way Labour should play it, or the Liberal Democrats should play it, or the exact route back to the EU. And I think what groups need to do is just to agree that what we want to do is to rejoin the EU and leave it at that. And it's not even like we have to come up with a plan for after that, because after that is easy. We know what being in the EU is. No one knew what being out of the EU was going to be like. It has to be unity. It has to be a unified cause from everyone. No internal politicking, if that's at all possible. And then you can amplify each other's messages without feeling the need to attack each other. I mean, it's very much like in party politics. Labour are constantly spending more time attacking themselves than the Conservatives. The result is that they keep losing. You know, people say Labour win elections when they decide to work together. It's the same lesson as far as I'm concerned. You know, unity is strength is basically my motto. So take that over. The answer to everything.
Thanks, Phil. Take that over to Max. Is there stuff that could be done better? Because one of the things that really just blows my mind is that both you and Phil have much bigger followings on YouTube than the Labour Party, which is the biggest political party in the 5th, 6th, 7th richest economy in the world. I mean, what? How? What? What are they doing? Even the Conservatives, they have 56,000 subscribers, whereas Labour's only got 36,000. What could they do better?
I think they need to have, they need to hire a consultant. Maybe Dominic Cummins is available at the moment.
He's not doing anything, is he?
but they need. I think they could. I don't agree with Novara Media, but they could use that as an example. So have it like a daily bulletin, or something like Graham Hughes. You know, a daily bulletin saying this is what's happening at the moment. This is what's happening with Brexit. But it needs to be. They need to counter the information that's been published in the mainstream media. They need to have a constant flow. That's something about YouTube, is that, you know, if you look at channels that are doing well, it's because they pump out a lot of material. Every day, consistent flow of material. They have to do something like that. But they have to have people who are convinced. You can't just pay somebody to do it. They have to be convinced. I think that's what they need to do. And they have to be a little bit firebrand in a way. They have to be passionate about what they're talking about. They have to attack. They have to be controversial maybe at times. These are the things that get people's attention. And of course, it's the younger generation that are watching YouTube videos or watching things on Twitter. They're not watching them. They're not watching things on. They're not watching the mainstream media on TV. viewership on TV, I think, is going down. People watch just soap operas, or they watch TV for Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever. But it's most of the information they get is through channels like these.
Yeah, I've had a question in the chat about demographics. Do you actually know the sort of age range that you get, Max?
Yes, it's actually about 30% between the age of 50 and 60.
Oh, right, okay.
Which is on the lowest.
It's unusual for YouTube, but not.
Yes, but I think it's because I haven't checked it recently, but it's about maybe about 25% is 30 to 45 age group.
Okay.
But the majority is actually over 50s. I don't know
Right.
what it is for Phil.
I think I'd be terrible on a daily show for Labour. I think Phil would be much better. Phil, put yourself forward. Do a daily show for Labour, please. Someone has to.
Well, they do need that. I mean, in terms of my demographics, yeah, it tends not to be the younger ones. It's like 0.1% 13 to 17-year-olds, 2.5% 18 to 24-year-olds. I'll tell you something funny, though. My partner's youngest has a friend who I think is going to become more than a friend at some point. And, they were talking, and it turned out he watches my channel. And when she says, oh, I live with him. No. So there are some. But yes, the vast majority are, about, it looks like about half, just over half are going to be over 50. In terms of people being interested in politics, it's not so much the young. I mean, people would say things like, oh, Jeremy Corbyn had a lot of support amongst young people. It's like, well, yes, he did, and no, he didn't. Yes, he did. If you looked at, when young people were polled, which was the party leader that inspired you the most, Jeremy Corbyn, fair enough. He didn't inspire them enough to go and vote, though. So that is what's needed. You have to engage. And like, if you look at Labour, you talk about the Labour Party's YouTube thing. I used to say this when I worked at the last college I worked full time, when they were trying to get their social media going. I said, it's boring, mate. You look at this. 2 weeks ago, they had something about Sadiq Khan. It's all campaign stuff, all of it. It needs to be, and like Max has said, it's got to be regular. You can't be doing stuff every week or every couple of weeks, something like that. There's no excuse for the Labour Party not putting out a video every day. And it doesn't have to directly involve an MP, but if it does involve an MP, make it your more personable MPs. And also your senior ones. Like, I've said at the moment, they're now trying to get out and about because they need to do that. The Labour front bench, they've got so many problems in Labour. Their front bench is largely unknown. It doesn't have many stars in the Labour Party, the Parliamentary Labour Party. It lost a lot of them. So they need that presence. The media aren't going to do them any solids. They can only get out and meet so many people, but they can get to a lot of people via social media. So get the ones that are quite fiery, get them on there. Get them on YouTube. Pay someone to do stuff that's obviously a Labour sport, like Max says, someone who believes in it. Surely they can pay. If I can make a living out of doing this and getting 2 videos out a week, they can pay someone to do a video a day that is engaging, specifically engaging. I don't just mean juggling or something silly, related, but engaging. And then every now and then, every couple of weeks, you get an MP on. And then every week, have a Q&A with a particular MP, particularly a front bench MP. And this sort of thing, it should be obvious. They know they need to improve.
It's a free platform that can go out to literally everybody in the country.
They know that they need to engage with the public, and they know they need social media to do that. And it is an absolute matter. What is this rubbish? Streamed 2 weeks ago, 1.4K views. Ed Miliband 3 weeks ago, 1.8K views. A month ago, 451 views. No.
It's very frustrating. It's very frustrating. Okay, we're coming up to time now, so I'm going to give the last question to Peter Burke, who's had his hand up for ages. So I'm going to just unmute Peter. If you can make it brief, because we do have to wrap up pretty soon.
Every so often, I'm tempted to think that the Tories are not insane. I remind myself about Kanzuk and the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which are the latest schemes for Britain to be a global power. Have they all gone mad, and how do they believe that the public will accept this?
Okay, Max, do you want to take that first?
They do believe the public have gone mad, and it's not going to work because Australia trades mainly with Asia, China, for example, and its neighbor New Zealand. Canada trades mainly with the United States. What are the other countries? That's it. And of course, the United Kingdom trades mainly with its neighbors, Europe. So Kanzuk is not a solution. But of course, it sounds good. It sounds sexy in a sense to the Brexiteers. Look, we're revigorating the empire again, resurrecting the empire in a sense, because these are countries that used to be part of the empire, and we're going to start trading with them again. But that's not how trade works. And these countries, for example, Australia, I uploaded a video about that today, where Liz Truss is, having some problems with the negotiator from Australia. They seem to think that Australia, if we trade with Australia, this is going to be able to replace the lost trade with the European Union. That's not the case. And even Australia is not all that concerned with trading with the UK, because, as I said, their main market at the moment is China.
I mean, it's very much the same thing with the CPTPP, isn't it? You say this to businesses, we're going to join this thing. Businesses in this country will basically go, it doesn't do any harm, but they know, like Matt says, they can't replace their lost trade. It's a long way away, and there are trade barriers there as well. If you reduce those trade barriers a little bit, okay, it's still a long way away. It costs a lot of money to put something on a boat, and it takes a long time to get there. One of the problems we have at the moment is not that we can't get goods into the EU. It's one of the problems can be, well, some of them we can't. It can take a very long time. Well, it takes a very long time to go across 2 oceans. So, especially when someone blocks up the Suez Canal. So it can't possibly be a reliable source of trade. It's not actually possible. And it's also a madness to me that we say we need to leave the EU because we don't like following other people's rules. And then Dominic Raab literally said the words, we're going to join the CPTPP, or we're going to join this, that, or the other, because we are in favor of rules-based trade. Right? So it's like we will follow anybody's rules as long as they're not European. That's fine, apparently.
Crazy. Okay.
But it's not harmful. It's just not helpful. It's neutral.
Okay, so it's past 9 o'clock. We're gonna have to wrap it up, I'm afraid. But thank you so much, Max and Phil, for taking time out to come and speak to everyone. We had over 180 participants in this, so it was fantastic. Went really, really well. Love to have you back at some point to do a similar thing. If you'd like to follow Max or Phil, they're very easy to find on YouTube. Just look for Maximilien, or for Phil's channel, it's called A Different Bias, and they put up at least 2 videos every single day, and they're always worth watching. Better than spending 3 hours listening to LBC in the afternoon and not really finding out very much about the world. So thanks for joining us. I'm just going to bring Richard in, because next week we have guest speakers Suzanne Oberhauser and Richard Corbett, and Richard Wilson, who's our host here, is going to tell us a little bit more about that. Here you go, Richard.
You've said it all really, Graham. It's a bit of a change of tone compared to tonight's excellent event, but hopefully be excellent in a different way. So Susan Oberhauser is the head of the EU's liaison office in the UK. Richard Corbett, you all know very well. Richard has recently been appointed to a committee that is managing the conference on the future of Europe, which launched this week. So it will be a good chance for Richard to tell us about that conference and how we can get involved. There's certainly the opportunity for us in the UK to get involved in that process, which is going to run for quite a long time, several months, I think. And Suzanne, obviously, is an opportunity for us to engage with the EU here in the UK, and it should be really interesting to explore what more we can do in terms of spreading the word about the EU in the UK and sort of keeping those channels open over there. So that's 7:30 next week. Tickets have just gone live, and I'll email everybody over the next couple of days with more details. So thanks very much, Graham, for setting up tonight. It's been great. Well done.
Welcome. We're getting lots of love in the messages here. Everyone's saying thanks, and thanks to Max and Phil. Absolutely brilliant, and everyone's had a good evening. So that's all good. Hope to see you all again next week.